Today for Devotions with Daniella, we are reading from the first book of Daniella. This is chapter 14, Not Fit for the Kingdom of God. This is the one on the audio that the audiobook director finally let me read in just full angry voice. Nuevo Leon, Mexico, 2002. Well, fuck it. I wiped blood from my lower lip as I sat up on the flat roof of our commune in Mexico, then lit the cigarette I had purchased individually from the cantina around the corner during our last witnessing trip. I paid careful attention to the way the wind was blowing so I could avoid the smell seeping into the torn shirt and tattered red hand-me-down jeans I'd thrown on before I ran out of the house. Smoking was the most rebellious thing I could think to do, and the biggest fuck you to everyone, and it felt somehow necessary for my survival, even though I still wasn't ready to get caught breaking such a big rule. But I would know I was doing it, and that's what mattered. Even though I knew it was bad for me, it was something I was choosing, and that stupid single cigarette would never hurt me as much as what had just happened. I wondered only briefly if I should tell anyone, if I should let my parents know so maybe they would protect me in the future. But I already knew I wouldn't, like I never told anybody about any of the other times. And like the other times, I knew it was my fault. I had told a lie so I could stay home and skip singing and performing and begging on the streets with the others. That sin had put me in his path, in an empty house, and this was my righteous punishment. I was angry. I hadn't stopped being angry since the day they told me we were leaving the States. I was too mad to even shed a single tear as I sat on my garage step and said goodbye to David, even as I begged him to write, to promise not to forget me. I hated that just as I had finally found a life, love, friends, some semblance of an identity as an American kid, all of it got yanked away from me and I was forced back into the world of communes. Big walls, witnessing, hours of prayer, discipline, isolation. I thought about my death constantly, all the different ways it could happen, all the different ways I could make it happen. I made up my mind that I hated Mexico and everything about it before I ever stepped foot into the country. Once there, I immediately launched my rebellion by refusing to speak Spanish anywhere the adults could hear me. I understood and picked up the differences from Portuguese easily, but I wouldn't use the language for any family business. When nobody noticed or punished me, I found new ways to rebel. I made friends with outsiders, the neighborhood teens I met when we took the younger kids to the park, careful to never let the adults overhear that I could speak passable Spanish. For a month, I made nothing but giant bowls of popcorn and salad for commune dinners I was still responsible for crafting. Mary and I continued regularly stealing money from the earnings we brought in from begging, too small to be noticed, but enough to buy things like candy and makeup, then cigarettes. We listened to Systemite music, Nirvana and Red Hot Chili Peppers, Alanis and Avril, hidden snugly in a portable CD players underneath the disc of a family music. Ever since San Diego, I developed a closer friendship with Mary as we moved into the same age group of young teenage girls, and we continued that in Mexico, adding Tabitha and Mariana, the 15 and 16-year-old girls who also lived in the home. We became an inseparable foursome, sharing all our clothes, makeup, and Systemite music in secret. The adults allowed us to go out on our own on smaller trips, to the grocery store or local gas station to sell posters, expecting our religious convictions would help us police each other, because that strategy had worked for so many decades in the family. But the exact opposite was true. Our rebellions fueled one another's. That day, I thought I had the perfect excuse not to go out with the others. It had barely been a year since my shin had snapped in half, and about 6 months since I'd started walking again. The adults had recently become even more afraid of being seen in public with kids who looked anything but happy and healthy, and so our missionary attitudes in public were controlled more than ever. About a year earlier, some Children of God uncles close to us in San Luis Potosi, Mexico, had been arrested for forcing their children to beg on the streets. They'd eventually been released, but it was a close call. We were all still afraid of persecution, so any day I didn't feel like going out, I would play up the limp that I still had. My legs were two different lengths after all. The adults, worried that they'd be suspected of beating their children, would happily let me stay home and run the kitchen. The job that had followed me all the way from Brazil. I didn't mind the performances we did in public. I'd been doing the singing and dancing all my life, and I liked seeing the joyful expressions it brought to people's faces. But I hated talking to them afterward, trying to sell pamphlets or CDs. Ever since the day the Twin Towers fell and we had that weird afternoon going door to door singing, the hustle of raising money filled me with dread, and I felt like I was doing something wrong, like we were tricking people and using God as an excuse. I hated Spanish, I hated Mexico, I hated witnessing about Jesus and telling people we were missionaries. We weren't missionaries. We didn't do anything to help people. We just begged for money so we could send it back to the family leadership, to my own grandfather who managed all the cash, still does. They, in turn, kept us half-starved while they told us where to live and what to believe and with whom we could associate. I stubbed out my cigarette with a long sigh. If anyone heard what was going on in my head, I'd be in more trouble than for the smoking. They wouldn't care that I'd just been raped, only that I was doubting. I wonder how Dad would react if he knew I was sitting up there smoking, making plans to backslide. I wondered what he would do if he knew one of his brothers had raped me, that so many of his brothers had raped me. I'm not sure which one would have upset him more. Neither, I realized. He'd probably say, "There's Daniella with all her drama, trying to get attention again." I touched my lip and flinched. It hurt. Everything hurt. But if there was one thing I knew about my body, it was its incredible ability to heal, to survive, to withstand anything. And if there was one thing I knew about myself, it was my ability to move on and not think about things I didn't want to think about. This wasn't new for me, but usually when the uncles did sex stuff, they didn't get violent, though sometimes they threatened to hurt me, to keep me from telling. Mostly, they acted as if they didn't believe anything they were doing was wrong. But this time I resisted. This time I wasn't in the mood for putting up with the BS. Nobody had touched me against my will since we'd left the mega communes and Uncle Jerry, where everyone called themselves their brother's keeper while they pretended they didn't know what the adults were doing. It had never occurred to me to resist back then. They told me it was God's love, and I believed them. What choice did I have? But as a teenager full of rage, with nothing left to lose, I wasn't controlled by the fear anymore. Whatever punishment they could dole out could never be as bad as keeping things the way they were. I hated the family. I hated love. I hated God. I wanted out. Let me be a systemite and leave me the hell alone. Okay, then there's an assault. On the roof, as I tasted the remnants of the finished cigarette in my mouth, I imagined the smoke had cleansed me, curling its way through my body and neutralizing everything bad. I'd make sure that I was never alone near Uncle Jose again. I would scurry away from the room the same way I'd noticed his daughters did. I might have been confused when I was younger, but I now knew nobody could explain what had happened as love, as God's will, or appropriate for an uncle. I thought about how I was 15, the same age Mom had been, and hoped I wouldn't end up pregnant. I touched my lips and looked at the red blood on my fingertips. I wondered how bad I looked, if I would bruise. He hadn't even been concerned about leaving visible marks on me, like he knew he was untouchable. I thought about what a respected leader he was, how he'd run teen girl heavy communes for years, gathering girls from all over the world. I remembered that he'd been the one to help with my leg, and wondered if he'd been scouting me even then. I wondered how many other girls he'd hurt like this. It wouldn't be that hard to cover up the marks, just a little bit of makeup, which the adults here were lax about. That afternoon, Tabitha and Mariana helped me. Red lipstick for my split lip, a little cover-up for the fingerprint bruises that bloomed on the sides of my throat. They didn't ask any questions, and I didn't offer any explanations. At dinner, my parents told me how pretty I looked, and I smiled back. My smile never reached my eyes anymore. Nobody noticed, anyway. You can get signed copies of Uncultured attached here, or listen to me read it to you anywhere you get your audiobooks.